Hi, everyone. My name is Rose Gerber. I'm the Director of Patient Advocacy and Education for the Community Oncology Alliance, and I'm happy that you have chosen to spend a half hour of your time today with us. I'm really excited and honored to have Abra Kelson as our special guest today. I've known Abra for many years, and we've done some really exciting things working together in advocacy. She's a licensed oncology social worker. I've had the honor of visiting her cancer center up in Washington State. Beautiful place, beautiful people, beautiful practice. And we're going to learn a lot today about what oncology social workers do. So Abra, thank you for being our guest. And I always like to spend a few minutes giving you some highlights or insider information about what we're doing at COA and with CPAN. And yesterday I did something I hadn't done in quite a while, and that was I actually got on a plane and went to a live event. And this was the COA board meeting. Our COA board, you can visit our website to see who our board members are, is made up of CEOs and practicing medical oncologists from cancer centers all across the United States. And we meet at certain times of the year to go over COA priorities. And of course, advocacy is always going to be a very important part of that. So I had the opportunity to give a brief, it was less than 10 minutes update on what we're doing with CPAN. And it was really exciting for me to be able to share that one of the ways that we're continuing to engage with all of you is by providing you with educational information. And one of the ways is through these advocacy chats. So for those of you who've been with us from the beginning when we launched this program in 2020, we bring you CEOs, MDs, medical social workers, nurses, just to give you a deeper understanding of everything that goes on behind the scenes of cancer centers. So Abra, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today. If we can go to the next slide, please. So basically, these are the goals for today: to understand the role of licensed mental health professionals, how oncology social workers assist patients and their families with care planning and decision-making, how social workers can help patients with the additional emotional and mental health issues that come with the cancer diagnoses, how oncology social workers engage with external patient advocacy support groups, and we're also going to learn about supportive counseling and resources. And now that I look at this bullet point, how social workers engage with external patient advocacy support groups, I jotted down a little note that I saw today that came across my email. So every morning, like many of you, I spend the morning reading industry trades and catching up with industry emails. And many of you may be familiar with an organization called Family Reach, which is headed by Carla Tardoff, the CEO, who I know and is a terrific leader and a terrific organization. And I jotted this down. It was a quote in her email: "It's impossible to put patients first if you're working alone." And I thought that was so applicable to today's topic. Like, the patient is in the center, but we need so many people supporting the patient. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Abra. And Abra, we're anxious to hear from all that you know about working as a social worker for so many years. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rose. I'm so excited to be here and talking about the role of the oncology social worker and just drawing some light on our profession and what we do and the services that we provide. So as Rose said, my name's Abra Kelson. I am a licensed oncology social worker at Northwest Medical Specialties, and we are a community oncology practice in Washington. So very excited. So my goal for today is really that anyone watching or listening in would really have a better understanding of what oncology social worker means and what the role is, what our role is on the cancer team. And especially for patients of knowing, where to go and how to access our services. So let's go ahead and move to slides. Sorry, Drew. Okay, one more. Thank you. All right, so just a basic kind of description of the oncology social worker. And this is a description that we use in our cancer center, but all of our social workers at Northwest Medical Specialties, we are licensed mental health professionals, and we're really there and available to help individuals navigate through the challenges brought on by cancer and its treatment, right? And so things that we offer are short-term counseling, connection to community-based resources and support, care planning, disability, all of those bullet points, too, that Rose said, this is the oncology social worker and really focusing on the psychosocial aspects of care. So as we move forward, go ahead and next slide, sorry. So I wanted to also bring in the definition and really the main service areas that our Association of Oncology Social Workers has described for us in providing a standard of practice and best practice for oncology social workers. But what we will find is that the oncology social worker, they're knowledgeable about cancer, and they're knowledgeable about the psychosocial effects and other effects of the disease, the treatment, and this is across the continuum of care. So, from initial diagnosis through survivorship, end of life, that social worker has special knowledge and experience and training in those areas and dealing and helping to manage through the psychosocial aspects. And we'll talk about what that exactly means, right? Yeah. But AOSW, the Association of Oncology Social Workers, does a nice job of really identifying 4 key areas in which the social worker is involved in serving patients, families, caregivers, practice, community, right? So if you move on to the next slide, we'll just take a deeper look on what that means and what that looks like. So number 1, the oncology social worker who's on your cancer care team, they're there to serve patients. They're there to serve their families, caregivers, loved ones, and to provide comprehensive psychosocial services and programs through all phases of cancer. And so when I'm talking about psychosocial, what I'm talking about is the emotional health, mental health, any practical challenges, access to food, clothing, housing, transportation, financial concerns, adjusting to role changes and family dynamics and systems, and really coming in and providing a lot of that mental health support, emotional support, and connections to resources so we can remove barriers to care, right? Next, you see how the oncology social worker really serves the organization, and serving the organization by providing that psychosocial, cultural, spiritual factors, right? Where we understand how those factors are influencing the patient and the families, and we're providing that knowledge across the practice, and we're forming different programs and services that really address those needs. So it's not uncommon that you would see that the oncology social worker within your cancer care team is helping to initiate different programs and support groups and social activities, and really trying to build this community of support for patients and their loved ones. And then next, this oncology social worker on your cancer care team also is serving in a way of outreach, right, to the community, identifying what are the supports, what are the resources, and how can we promote them, how can we strengthen them, how can we advocate them to really bring in more services and supports for our patients and their families, and meeting all of those needs. So using the community to do that.
Abra, I think it's incredible the way you have this grid laid out, and at the very top is, and it was your opening statement, was you're focusing on patients, families, and caregivers, because as we know, patients do not go through cancer by themselves. You're going to have an impact on your family. Even if you're going to try to act like everything's normal, your life has completely changed. You talked a lot about important points, like even how there's role changes, and you triggered a memory. I know that, I've shared many times that my children were very young when I had cancer. And I remember meeting with the social worker, and she had asked me, what was I going to do about meals? Did I need a meal support service? And honestly, I was like, why is she asking me this? I'd never thought about it. But once she asked me the question, I thought, well, right, I have no energy to cook. I don't even, I'm not eating myself, but that didn't mean that my family didn't need to eat. And, you know, it was such a gift for someone like you, like the social worker I spoke to bring up these things, because the patient is so overwhelmed. They don't know what to think. Their fear is of dying and just getting through day to day. So the fact that you're reaching out and helping the family members, I think is very important. So thank you for having that in position number one.
Yeah, no, thank you for addressing that, Rose, because I do. I think it's so important for everyone to understand that the oncology social worker and the services that are being provided and the supports are not just for the patient alone, but really for their system, right? Because it does impact everyone in that support network in different ways. And a lot of times, like you said, there are young children that are trying to understand what does this mean, right? And the social worker can help too, for parents to help. How do I have that conversation? And how can I create this structure for my kids too, where while I'm going through this. So, and then conversely too, like with spouses as well and you know, it's a range. Anyone who is close and acting as, you know, a caregiver or close support, you know, really can rely on that oncology social worker as well for support. So what I want to do now, so if you could go ahead and forward the slide. So I want to talk a little bit, and I want to relate a little bit more deeply of, you know, what the role of the social worker is and why that's important for you, you know, for you as a patient or, you know, as a loved one. Why is that important? And so this is a cancer support community, which I'll talk about a little bit as far as resources. You know, they conduct a lot of research about psychosocial care and what is it that's impacting our patients and people living with cancer. And what they found is that there are universal challenges, right, of living with cancer. And what they found was unwanted aloneness, financial burden, loss of hope, loss of control, living with uncertainty. And so, you know, thinking about these kind of challenges, and then, you know, this is just living with cancer alone, not including that we're now living through a worldwide pandemic. And you can see how each of these challenges has been exacerbated and intensified, right, by the different challenges brought by COVID-19. But here, the role of the social worker is that we're asking these questions. We're trying to get to the bottom of it. You know, what are the challenges that you're facing? And I think what you said, Rose, was really telling it. And what I face and encounter a lot is, you know, when I'm first introducing myself to patients, and maybe this is during, you know, some of their initial visits, and they say, oh, I don't even know, you know, I don't even know what I need right now. And that's okay, you know, but I think it's also just a comfort to know this is the number that I call when I start identifying, you know, what those needs are, what those challenges are become, right? So if you move forward one slide.
Abra, again, and I ask these questions because I'm anticipating what some of the audience might think as well. You had a bullet point that was unwanted aloneness. Mm-hmm. And I think what you may mean there is not just physically being alone, because I know some cancer patients do go through the cancer experience alone. But I think what's common to a lot of cancer survivors, and I know this from talking to thousands of cancer survivors over the last decade, is sometimes you could be surrounded by family, friends, but you feel so alone because no one understands you. Is that what you're encountering a lot of, or is it physically being alone, or is it both?
Both. Yeah, I would definitely say both. And it's interesting that you brought up this point, because as I'm moving forward and we're talking about we're trying to also understand, you know, what are the challenges, but the social worker is trying to understand what are the resources that the patient has. And what are the things that are depleting the resources? And one of the first things that I talk about here is a limited social support. And what I wanted to say is that there's a caveat, right? Is that, there are people who don't have the support network, they don't have the family, and they're truly, alone in this. And there's other people that really do have great support, a great family system, great friend network, that's really supportive and wanting to be there. But I hear a lot from patients, at different times, is that maybe some of what they're going through and they're processing internally, they don't feel ready to talk about that with even the closest people. Because they don't want to burden them. They don't want to worry them. They don't want to cause additional stress or sadness or grief, and so it's too hard for them. So then there is that feeling of aloneness still, even being surrounded by so many loved ones. So looking further down the line, these are things that we know deplete our resources and our ability to cope and manage through these challenges. So limited social support, unmanaged distress, untreated depression, unrecognized grief. These things can really make it a challenge to cope with the challenges brought on by cancer and the treatment that you're going through. And so I kind of wanted, and I was hoping everybody would be open to this, but what I want to do is propose that these feelings, of sadness, grief, anger that people experience, I want everyone who's listening to imagine, these feelings that maybe you're avoiding, or maybe let's say it's yourself. Yeah, I think that's going to be the best. That you have these feelings that you're avoiding, you're uncomfortable, anger, sadness, grief, and you're just trying to avoid them. And I want you to imagine that you're swimming in a large pool. And while you're swimming in this pool, you notice that there's this very just ugly beach ball, and it's just floating, right? It's floating by you, and you're like, oh, this beach ball is so annoying. I don't like it, right? You don't want it anywhere near you. And so you say, okay, I'm going to get rid of this thing. So you take the beach ball and you start pushing it underwater. And oh, gosh, it just pops right up in your face. So then you try again. You're working with all your might and you're pushing this beach ball down, and it just keeps coming up. And each time it's just a little more force, right? Even more force. So this continues for several minutes, and what you end up doing is you hug the ball and you decide, oh, I'm going to just put all my body weight into this, and I'm going to push it down really far deep in the water, as far as I can go. And what we see is that you're really struggling and you're draining all of your energy trying to keep this beach ball submerged and underwater. So I want to just give the correlation of thinking of this beach ball as feelings that you might be avoiding. And we're going to come back to this visualization, and we're going to see, what are other ways, instead of trying to hold it down and spending all our energy there, what are other ways that we could do that? And how this relates to the oncology social worker is that, like I said, before, when we're talking about the challenges, is that social worker is doing that assessment, asking those questions about what are the challenges, looking for the resources a patient has, or maybe that are being depleted, and then coming in to provide support, connection to resources, connection to mental health, depending on what the needs are. So I want you to keep that in your mind, because we're going to come back to it, okay?
That's a really good example, Abra. It really is, because you push it, it's going to come back. It's push it, so that's really, really great.
Yeah. Oh, I just realized my face is just completely white. I'm so sorry.
No,
the sun.
It's the sun. Go ahead and close window. You need.
Is that better?
You look great.
Sorry. I wasn't looking at my face, and I just realized, oh, I have a bright light on my face. All right. So yeah, if you can move forward, Drew. One more slide. Great. So I wanted to just highlight and spotlight, and since we're talking about kind of unmanaged depression, I wanted to spotlight depression and really show how the oncology social worker's role really relates to caring for the mental health and addressing depression within patients at the cancer center. So just to give you just a little bit of information or stats on depression is that we know that depression is very common. It's an estimated 16 million adults in the United States struggle with depression. And different research that's been done around the cancer population is that 1 in 4 people with cancer will experience depression or depressive disorder, so about 25%. Wow. And it's been found to be 2 to 3 times more likely than the general population for individuals with cancer to develop depression. So it's important, because now because with it, okay, sorry, step back. What I'm trying to say is that because, now with this cancer diagnosis, there's even more risk for developing depression. So as a cancer team, we want to be sensitive to that there is increased risk and it can influence the cancer trajectory, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that here on the next slide. So I just wanted to highlight, some of the research that's been done around depression and cancer. And what we found, or what research has found, is that depression can impact cancer outcomes. It can increase frequency of medical visits, and then also has an impact on healthcare costs. So when you're thinking about depression, and if you think about the symptoms, so when you have depression, along with that comes fatigue, decreased energy, difficulty concentrating, changes in your appetite and your sleep, feeling of hopelessness and helplessness, feeling down, sad, depressed. So if you imagine that when you have depression, it's pretty difficult to do a lot of things, right? And what we end up seeing is that sometimes people will maybe put off taking that medication, or I don't feel like getting out of bed, I can't go to this treatment visit, or, and so what they found is that people were with depression were having poor medication adherence. There was impairment to personal health management. So things like, especially if you're experiencing depression and you're struggling to find meaning or purpose or a reason to even continue, then how likely are you going to be staying on track of what your treatment plan is that you decided with your oncologist and your cancer care team? And what ends up happening too is this, it makes sense that this also relates to increased medical visits, increased hospitalizations, longer hospital stays. And then again, that also relates to the healthcare costs. And what this particular study found was that individuals with cancer who also had depression incurred healthcare costs that were 113% greater than patients without depression. And so here, what I'm hoping to really relate to you guys is that, the oncology social worker often is in the role of assessing for depression and providing intervention, whether that's in the center providing mental health counseling or referring out and connecting you to a community provider. But as you can see, these things have a big impact on the cancer experience of the patients.
It's really interesting.
Okay, and Drew, if you can move forward. Perfect. Okay. So I want to go back to our beach ball. And I want to think about, okay, so you're holding the ball and you got all your body weight there. But I wanted you to think about, what are other options? how are other ways that you could deal with this obnoxious, annoying beach ball that you just don't like, right?
Yep.
But what would happen? What would happen if you actually let go of the ball? Well, I mean, first it's going to pop up, right? And it's going to be big because you've been holding it down with all your might. And you're probably not going to like it because now it's going to be floating really close by you, right? And it's going to be really uncomfortable. But if you just let it float there for a while without grabbing it, eventually it's going to drift further and further away, maybe to the other side of the pool. So that's maybe one way you can deal with it. The other strategy might be maybe you deflate the beach ball, right? So what if you grab the beach ball, you let it pop up, you grab it and you say, okay, I have to deflate you, but how am I going to do this? So in order to deflate the beach ball, you're going to have to turn it around and examine it and look at it. And you're going to have to find, where's that valve? How do I get to the valve to release some of this air and get it flat, right? So that's exactly what I'm proposing that individuals start doing with those negative emotions or difficult emotions that we want to avoid, right? And I think that's pretty common, is that we're like, okay, I got this. I'm just gonna, I got it. I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna avoid that because I'm gonna be positive. I'm proposing a different way of looking at it, is that you actually acknowledge that feeling and acknowledge that sadness and that pain and that anger, and cry and scream and do whatever you got to do to really acknowledge that and let yourself experience that emotion fully. And then by doing that, you can start letting that deflate, right? Let that negative emotion deflate so it doesn't have so much power over you in your life. And a lot of times, what that means too is getting some additional professional support to deflate that ball, because there's a lot going on. And what I tend to find too is that, it's not just the cancer diagnosis or the treatment, but everything else in life as well, just piled on top. So I want to challenge everyone to do that. The other thing, I wanted to also provide just some helpful tips to help self-manage depression or stress or other uncomfortable feelings, right? And so number one, we have on here laughter, humor, and I can't tell you how many times I hear this a day from patients. It's just laughter and humor, like, really helps to get people through. And I actually was doing some research on this, and there is actually research that has shown the benefits of laughing and improving your humor. And for example, within the Mayo Clinic and VA, they talk about how it relieves your stress response, it improves the immune system, it relieves pain, increases personal satisfaction, improves mood, all of these things. And it's really interesting because they even have laughter yoga now, which I didn't know existed. But so there's all sorts of ways, like reading a joke book or finding a funny clip or just engaging in laughter or humor, each day is very good for your health. And of course, exercise and nutrition, these are all things that I'm sure, the oncologist is constantly pushing as well, but what we know is that not only are they good for your physical health, but also your mental health. And then getting social, getting involved. And right now, that feels difficult, I think, for a lot of people. But, what are new ways that you can become social? And whether it's coming to a Zoom like this or doing a virtual hangout, there's lots of other kind of 21st century kind of social things that you can do, right? But yeah, just engaging in that project that you've been putting off, limiting the news time, stuff like that, engaging in a support group. But also what we know too, with depression, anxiety, mental health, it ranges in severity. And so not saying that these are going to be the cure-all fix for a major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety. Definitely, you want to talk to your oncologist, you want to talk to your social worker, to get the treatment, because those are real illnesses that have real treatment, right? But these are just some really great strategies to help improve your mood and your everyday. All right, so move forward. Sorry, I'm horrible on the slide decks. Okay, so the other thing that we know about social workers is that they know about the different resources, and your oncology social worker will be able to point you in the right direction. So I wanted to highlight a few of the supportive organizations on a national level: American Cancer Society, Cancer Support Community, Cancer Care. All of these programs have wonderful support for patients and families. They all have different helplines that provide various levels of services, connection to community resources, counseling, support groups, education. So these are really great resources to utilize as well if you're encountering, different challenges. And then lastly, if you want to move forward one slide, and I think, perfect. So, as Rose said, I'm the CPAN leader at Northwest Medical Specialties, and as we talk about too about self-managed ways to combat and depression and distress, things like that, is getting involved in something that you're passionate about and helping others and serving. And so Community Oncology Alliance Patient Advocacy Network is an incredible way for patients to really take their passion and their experience and help the field at large and serve other patients too that are going through it. Oftentimes I hear a lot, especially when patients are kind of ending treatment and figuring out, like, well, what do I do now? But I still want to be involved, and I care so deeply about the patients and the other patients and families that I'm seeing here, and I want to make a difference, and I've had this experience and I want to share it. And so this is a great way to really, CPAN, COA is such a great way to be involved and really share that passion and an experience. And so definitely recommend anyone who has that energy and passion and wants to get involved to join CPAN, and it's just been an incredible experience. And then that is all I have. So go ahead and move to the last slide. I just want to say thank you so much for having me here today. And I really do hope that this has shed a little bit of light on the oncology social worker. And if you have questions, please call me or text me or no, sorry, email me. Yes, definitely available for any questions. So.
Thank you so much, Abra. What a gift of your knowledge that you shared with us. And I really, really love the beach ball example, because it's just so perfect. I think so many of us do that. We just try to shove things away, but it's going to pop back up. So, learning how to manage it, and that column with all the tips, you intended it for survivors, but it's important for all of us. So thank you so much. And Drew, if you can advance to the next slide, please, so I can make some final announcements. Again, we're going to keep bringing you more tips and continuing with this theme of the importance of self-care, of reaching out to others, whether it's an oncology social worker or an organization. Abra mentioned many organizations. We're going to be spotlighting an organization that does some really great work targeting caregivers, because in her opening slide, she mentioned patients, families, caregivers, and the cancer experience affects more than just the patient. So thank you again for spending time with us today. And just a reminder that we'll have this video available on Facebook Live, as well as on our YouTube channel, and you can go back and reference it and hopefully share it with others. Thank you, Abra, and thank you to our listeners. Enjoy the rest of your day.